What does it mean to believe Jesus? Maybe especially in the midst of pain. What does it mean to believe Jesus then? I see at least 3 things about what it means to believe Jesus from this passage. The first is that to believe is more than just knowing Jesus. To believe is more than just knowing Jesus. Because remember, Thomas, this is not some stranger to Jesus. Thomas the disciple, he's not brand new. Thomas was one of the 12 that Jesus handpicked to come and follow him. Thomas was there to see. We've been through John, the miraculous signs. He was there. He saw those things. He chose to follow, and he lived with Jesus and the 12 disciples for about 3 years. So he's not brand new. He knows Jesus. Yet here we find he doesn't believe. Even though all the guys that were walking with Jesus with him said, literally, they just saw Jesus, Thomas refuses to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. He says in verse 25, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, put my hands into his side, I will not believe. What happened? Isn't this one of his guys? What happened to Thomas? Now, to be fair, I feel Thomas gets a bad rap. Every time he's named, he's called Doubting Thomas, okay? You know, he wasn't always like that. Did you know, for him, his faith was not like a straight line. It wasn't linear, right? It had ups and downs, I think like many of us. Did you know that the Gospel of John happens to be the only gospel that records things that Thomas said? Thomas the disciple said. He's known for this kind of statement, but he speaks 4 other times in the Gospel of John. 2 of them are found in this passage, but he speaks twice before that. Let's go back a little bit. Turn back the page a couple. The first time Thomas's words are heard are in John 11:16, chapter 11. So almost, 10 chapters back, when he says to his fellow disciples, because they know things are going down in Jerusalem, Thomas is quoted saying these words, "Let us also go that we may die with him." Woo! Thomas at first, he's on fire for Jesus. He's one of those ride or die sort of guys. That was Thomas. The second time Thomas's words are recorded, it reveals a little crack in his faith has started to come in. It's on Jesus' last night with his disciples. You'll find this in John 14. Thomas is trying to listen as Jesus is trying to tell his disciples, his best friends that he's been with, hey guys, it's going to start going down. Things are going to start getting hard. And he's trying to explain to them what's going to happen. But in John 14:5, Thomas says, "Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way?" Thomas here, he's starting to feel lost on what Jesus is saying. He's starting to get confused. What are you talking about? You're going to die? Never. And then the unthinkable happens for Thomas. His teacher that he respected so much and was willing to die for, remember, he said those words, was tortured on a cross. His Jesus, nails were hammered into his Jesus' hands by the Romans. And a spear was run through his beloved Jesus' side to the point where water comes out because Jesus had already completely bled out. Only water was left. If you witness that, that would be traumatic for anybody. But maybe it was especially traumatic for Thomas. It seems where we find Thomas in this passage, he has become hardened by that trauma. He has dug in his heels and he starts taking an extreme position. He says, not only do I need to see Jesus for myself to believe again, I need to put my hands into his side. Thomas isn't saying, I'm not sure, guys. He's saying emphatically, I don't know if you caught this, he will not believe until that happens. This sounds like someone who wants to fight, right? It sounds like someone who's speaking from some deep pain. Maybe we could relate to Thomas. Maybe because of pain you have experienced, you have found yourself in a stubborn position with God. Maybe you have some deep disappointment. God did not come through for you. You were deeply disappointed, and that experience has hurt you. Maybe, like Thomas, you have made some destructive vows, some ultimatums to God, where we put ourselves and God in a box and we're saying, God, you got to move on my terms. You got to move on my terms. I was hurt by you, God. You got to move on my terms. How can we ever relate to that? This is a disciple. This is not a brand new person. This is a disciple of Jesus who's walking with Jesus for years. Sometimes we learn from Thomas that we could know Jesus. We could be going to church faithfully for years. But we find, if we're honest, we do not believe Jesus when the stuff hits the fan. We're like, where are you at, Jesus? How could someone who had been walking with Jesus turn away from him like this? If you've been walking for a while with Jesus, it happens. When the unexpected, the hardship, the pain comes, it can shake our faith. It can freeze and blind us like it did Mary. It can cause us to flee in fear like the disciples did. Or it can cause us to fight and harden like it did to Thomas. Sometimes things happen to us that are so painful that it hardens us from believing. So I want to ask you, and to really think about, in what areas of our life has our faith hardened? Maybe not completely, but there's certain areas where we struggle to trust Him, where we've limited God. Think upon that. What might that be in our lives? So what do we do when our faith is in that place, when it's hardened? We must remember the second point of what it means to believe Jesus. The second point is to believe means to be open to what Jesus does show you. Be open to what Jesus does show you. We don't know why Thomas wasn't there in the room with the rest of the disciples. Do you wonder that? They were all there, but he wasn't there for some reason. Maybe he wanted out. Maybe he was done. That was the last straw for him. Or maybe he felt left out. We don't know what was going on for Thomas, but he wasn't there. But what we do know is that Jesus met Thomas still. Jesus came back. And he came back for Thomas too. Maybe not as soon as Thomas wanted, but Jesus did show up. You know, no one told Jesus what Thomas needed, and certainly not Thomas. But Jesus knew, because he loved Thomas. Jesus is so gracious to him. I don't know if you see this. Jesus is so gracious to him. He meets Thomas where he's at. Even though he makes this kind of stubborn declaration, he meets Thomas where he's at. Jesus doesn't come in hot like he could have. But you know what the first words again? Peace. He speaks peace. And then he speaks directly to what Thomas said he needed. Jesus didn't have to. He's Jesus, but he did. That's what Thomas needed. So he said, okay, Thomas, I'll give you what you want. However, Jesus does want better for Thomas. So after he's assured Thomas of his love and meets Thomas's demand, Jesus checks Thomas. He rebukes him here. He says, right, Thomas, basically, I don't want you to stay in doubt. But now I want you to move forward. I want you to move forward in faith, to trust, to believe me. And Thomas does open himself to Jesus. He does open himself to Jesus. Thomas does believe here again now. If you notice, even though he said to his friends he needed to put his hand in Jesus' wounds. When Jesus offers his body to be checked, I don't know if you caught this, Thomas no longer needs that. He no longer needs that. When he sees his Jesus, it's enough. He opens up again. And in fact, when Thomas opens his mouth, with the last words we actually ever hear from Thomas in Scripture, he says a most powerful confession. Thomas says, "My Lord and my God." Now, to be clear, okay, Thomas is not just surprised, okay, because OMG wasn't an expression back then, okay? That's a modern expression. He actually meant God. How do we know this? The actual word used for God here is the Greek word. It was written in Greek, theos, which means God. This is the same word that's used throughout the book of John that's talking about the one true God. It's the same word from chapter 1, verse 12, that says, "Yet to all who did receive Jesus, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." That's what he says when he says, "My Lord, my God." And that confession is significant because Thomas is saying that Jesus in the flesh is God. And you know, Jesus doesn't say, "Hey, no, I'm not God. Don't worship me." He doesn't say that. He doesn't dispute it. This matters. Why does this matter? This matters because God expressed himself in a particular way in Jesus. When God took on flesh, it looked a certain way. We heard last week from Elion's testimony. If you didn't catch these testimonies, oh man, catch them. They're up on YouTube, okay? We heard last week from Elion's testimony that when he too made this kind of confession, he did it quietly, but Elion experienced God physically like he never did before when he realized Jesus is God. We need to know that our God isn't just any God, but the one who comes close to us. It's that kind. A God who understands and is willing to suffer to love. That's our God. A God who will even meet the last, the least, and the most lost. Hebrews 1:3, it declares that this Jesus is the exact representation of God in the flesh. If you're saying, "God, can you show me yourself?" It looks like Jesus. That's why it's significant. And Thomas is ready now to fully believe and follow this Jesus. In fact, Thomas, the disciple, doesn't turn after this. Doesn't mean he didn't struggle, but he doesn't turn after this. And according to church tradition, he boldly testifies about Jesus. It says all the way to India he went. That's the kind of faith he had. And where just like Jesus, he himself was taken by soldiers. And you know how he died? He was ran through with spears. Just like his master that he loved. Now, a word on doubting, okay? If you've ever struggled with doubts, okay? Doubts, they happen. Even those that Jesus has chosen experience doubt. Doubt does not make you evil or a devil, okay? I need to say this again. If you've experienced doubt, doubt does not make you evil or a devil. But staying in doubt does make us vulnerable to the devil. Staying in doubt does make us vulnerable to the devil. So if doubt is kind of your default position, that's not what Jesus wants for us. He'll meet us there, but that's not what he wants for us. How can we rather believe what he does show us? So, when was the most recent time you doubted God? That you doubted Jesus? For me, it was a couple weeks ago. When was the last time? Can you think of that time? When was the last time you doubted Jesus? What did Jesus show you at that time? How did he answer your prayer? Maybe in an unexpected way, but how did he answer? How did he encounter you when you were in a bad way? That was beyond coincidence. You have that in your mind? If you do, believe that Jesus who showed up for you. Jesus is with you. Stop doubting and believe. For those of us who struggle to believe with Jesus, hang on, don't give up. You know, Thomas went back. He did go back to the upper room before he saw Jesus. So go back, get around other disciples who have witnessed Jesus. Go to a life group. Get around some folks. If your faith is struggling, get honest with some folks. He was able to tell his friends this. It's so important that we don't try to do this faith journey alone, especially when we're going through those dark valleys. You know, when we're in isolation, for those of us who've been in this recovery, the worst thing we could do is when we isolate ourselves. I was talking to some brothers and sisters about this the other day, right? When we isolate ourselves, then we get stuck in our own heads. We have to come out of that place. We need to get around other people of faith. That helps us to remind us that we're not alone. The devil will have us believe that, but it's not true. Jesus will reveal to us himself in time. And, you know, because there's pain, that there's death, that doesn't mean that Jesus isn't trustworthy. Jesus, in the very way he lived, he taught, and he died, show us that it is often through our suffering that we can actually finally maybe be of service. It is through pain that we can get perspective that we didn't have before. We can maybe be a little bit more compassionate to others. It is even through death that resurrection will come. We don't like to be uncomfortable, okay? That's me. I'm the chief of that. But Jesus challenges us out of our comfort zone to go and find true comfort in him. When that storm is raging in your life, Jesus can walk to you on that water. It is when we lose life, Jesus says, that's when we're going to find it. It's a puzzle. That's how Jesus works. So in the midst of the struggle, don't close up. Open yourself up to where Jesus might be. Even when we're closed, literally the room that Thomas was in was like closed, locked. Jesus can still meet us. That's no stop to him. Let's remember to ask Jesus, who promises to never leave us or forsake us, where he is. We're going to ask him, Jesus, where are you? Even in unexpected places. What might he be showing you about himself? Belief is being open to what he does show you. But what if I can't see anything, Dave? What if Jesus doesn't show up or show me anything? I don't see anything. When we do these card things, I don't hear anything. Lastly, number 3, to believe is trusting Jesus even when you don't see what you want right now. To believe is to trust in Jesus even when you don't see what you want right now. For those of us who haven't seen what we're hoping for in this room, and you're still holding on, still trying to trust Jesus, Jesus is so proud of you. Jesus is so proud of you. How do I know this? Jesus is glad for Thomas, who believes when he sees. But Jesus sees something else. He lifts up faith that's even greater. He says, Thomas, I want to show you something even greater. Jesus tells Thomas and us these words in verse 29, the final verse of this passage of today. Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Who's Jesus talking about here? Who's he talking about here? Yeah, some people can be honest. You know, who has seen Jesus in the flesh? You've seen him in the flesh. Okay, that's nobody in here. if you haven't seen Jesus in the flesh, but you still believe him, he's talking about you. He's talking about us. He's saying you're blessed. You haven't even seen, but you believe. Come on. Jesus says you're blessed. You can be happy in God because there is faith in you that persists beyond sight. There's a faith in you. Jesus says, I bless that. How much sweeter for us when we see Jesus on that day face to face for the first time, when we've been longing for him all our lives. How sweet would that be? If you've got some belief, like a mustard seed, that is something. That is something Jesus can work with. So belief, it doesn't mean 100% certainty all the time. Who's got that? Belief is trusting in Jesus, what he has done, what he has said, what he has shown you. And because you know these things about Jesus, you trust that he will come through. You know he will. We don't always know why or how soon, but we believe. If we have come to know Jesus' character, that really helps us to hold on to him and still leave some room for him to move. If you have that faith, you have something. Jesus wants to bless that today. If God's shown up for you the way that you asked, like Thomas, great, awesome. But if he hasn't yet, I'm talking to you. Jesus wants you to know it's more blessed if you believe him now, based on what Jesus has already shown you in your life in the past. If you actually went ahead and believed in Jesus because of the testimony of your friends and family. You are blessed because you have enough of Jesus deep inside your heart. Your trust in him is stronger. Your love for Jesus, it can go the extra mile. So Dave, how can I build up my belief in Jesus even when I don't see what I want right now? Okay, so I'm going to ask you again. I'm not just saying this rhetorically. Think about this. What has he already made known to you? You have the teachings and the eyewitness accounts of those who witnessed Jesus. His way of life, the way he turned the world upside down, and how Jesus' love was so different from human, selfish, self-centered love. It was self-giving love in the ultimate act. If Jesus' words and life has ever spoken to you, you know you could believe him right now. You also have the resurrection of Jesus. You know you could actually visit the cremated remains of Buddha. You can go to the tomb also of Muhammad, the prophet. But you cannot go to the tomb of Jesus because he's not there. Jesus appeared alive to his disciples, and they went to the ends of the earth to share that good news. And you know, they're all killed for it. John was probably the one that actually maybe died of old age because they couldn't kill him. They tried. But all the other 12, they gave their lives. Would you lay down your life for something that you knew was actually not true? Would you do that? No. Their witness in that way shows you it wasn't a lie. You can believe Jesus right now. And you have your own experience. You have your own experience. What do I mean by that? Once again, where did Jesus meet you at your lowest and darkest moments when no one else could or would? I know there's some testimonies in here that have not even been spoken. God, show us right now. Show us right now. Where did you show up for us that we have no other explanation, but it was you. It was you, God. You saved me then. Where did he give you the words that you needed to hear? The love that you had never experienced before? The peace that you couldn't find anywhere else? Where did you experience that? Bring that to mind right now. Where has Jesus transformed the way that you see life, others, and even yourself, that you're not the same person that you were a couple years back? I want you to remember this. This is why testimonies are so important. It's for these dark hours. You can believe in Jesus now because of that. So I'd like to call up the worship team. Sometimes our pain hardens our ability to believe. But Jesus can still meet us in our pain to resurrect our belief. But even if we don't see what we want right now, Jesus is challenging you. Believe him still. Find that blessing now. Why do you believe in Jesus? Why is he worth believing in for you? If you've experienced Jesus in any way, please write it down before the sun sets on another day. Let it be a testimony and a testament that Jesus is real and he's worth trusting in. Remember that. Then let us draw from that when we're having trouble right now. Let's remember that the God of then is the same God now, and he will be forever. Let that encourage our belief in the belief of others. Then we could say with Thomas, Jesus, you're my Lord and my God. So I want us to respond to Jesus right now. Okay, there's index cards you'll see on the side, on the ends of the pews closest to the inner aisle. So it'll be on these ends, and it'll be on these ends. And if you're, if you have strong faith and you can't, you could take out your phone without going on Instagram, then you could write it down in your phone as well, okay? But I just want you to write something down. What I'm going to have you, whatever God was bringing to your mind, I want you to trust God on that. If some memory of Jesus meeting you in the past came to mind, once again, maybe not in the flesh, right? But some deliverance that you experienced, some way that you have no way to explain, but maybe that was God. Whatever that was for you, where he met you, I want you to write that down. Write it down. And if you have it in your notes on your phone or something, keep adding to that list. I'm sure there's more than one even for many of you. Write it down. It's going to save your life. So once again, write down any way that God has met you, a miracle or something that you can't explain, some way that God met you in a place of your darkness, in the place of where you were low, where you were in a bad way. Jesus helped you out of that. Write something down. So hopefully you got one thing there. I encourage you to keep adding to that. Keep adding to that list. Take a picture of it so you can remember it. It's going to help you. And for those of you, you can't think of anything. It's all right. I want to invite us all now to, if you want to if God's just downloading stuff, keep writing, okay? But if not, would you stand with me in a posture to engage with Jesus right now? So I want to encourage you, church. Don't freeze. Don't flee. Don't even fight. I want to encourage you to be in faith in Jesus right now, in belief. Jesus is life itself. Now, if you're dealing with some pain and are having trouble trusting Jesus again, come up for prayer. If you're hungry for a revelation and encounter with Jesus now, like Thomas did, come up for prayer. If you would like a blessing to keep on believing even though you don't see the thing right now that you want, come up for prayer. Leadership team, I've talked to some of you already. Please come up. I want you to listen and pray for folks. If you yourself need prayer, come up too. Lord, Jesus, our Lord, our God, meet us. Meet us, we pray.